I have a friend who really annoys me, but he thinks we're best friends. And I can't tell him the truth, because he'll just fall apart. And I play this role every time, and inside I just hate myself and him at the same time. I have a secret, and I've carried it for years, even though it's probably the dumbest thing anyone could ever feel guilty about. I once pretended to be sick just to avoid a family gathering, and it spiraled into the most absurd chain of events I still can't believe happened. It all started when I was 16. My parents, who are usually reasonable, decided it was a great idea to throw this massive reunion for our extended family. We're talking dozens of relatives, some I hadn't seen since I was a kid, all hovering and asking questions I never had answers for. I hated these gatherings. My idea of a perfect weekend was staying in my room, playing video games, maybe ordering a pizza, and pretending the outside world didn't exist. So naturally, the thought of facing Aunt Karen, who loves to comment on my future career choices every single year, filled me with panic. The night before the reunion, I was lying in bed, scrolling aimlessly through my phone, when I had this sudden ridiculous thought: what if I just called in sick? It seemed harmless at first. Just a simple lie, a tiny white lie to get a break. But you know how lies work, they have a way of growing legs. So, I decided to go all in. I spent the entire night researching symptoms that sounded believable but weren't dangerous, because heaven forbid anyone actually take me to a doctor. I memorized phrases like, "I feel dizzy," "my stomach is killing me," and the ultimate classic, "I think I caught something contagious, so I better stay home." The next morning, I rolled out of bed with a face that could rival any Oscar-winning performance. I moaned, I clutched my stomach, I even managed a dramatic faint into the couch cushions when my mom peeked into my room. She gave me that skeptical look parents give, the one that says, "I see what you're trying to do, but I'll let it slide this time." Victory. I was free. Or so I thought. Here's where things started getting ridiculous. My mom, bless her, decided that if I was really that sick, I needed care. She went all out, making soup, insisting I stay hydrated, measuring my temperature every hour, and even suggesting that if things didn't improve, she'd call the doctor. I suddenly realized I was in way over my head. I didn't actually want to be sick. I just wanted to avoid small talk and awkward questions. But at this point, my lie had turned into a full-blown performance art piece. I was lying in bed with a heating pad, moaning on cue, and occasionally groaning dramatically when the soup was too hot to eat. I started keeping a diary of my symptoms, so that I could remember to be consistent. By noon, I was exhausted, not from being sick, but from pretending to be sick. Then came the first test. My uncle, who is notoriously nosy, decided to check on me. He opened the door, leaned in, and said, "Feeling any better, champ?" Panic. I had to think fast. So I did the only thing that made sense at the time. I threw up. On cue. Well, not real vomit, of course, but I staged it so convincingly that he jumped back, gagging slightly, muttered, Okay, I'll leave you alone," and slammed the door. At that moment, I felt a twisted combination of relief and absolute horror at what I had just done. I had just faked being violently ill to escape social interaction. And it worked. By mid-afternoon, the situation escalated further. My dad came in with his phone, saying, "You know, your aunt texted me, she's worried. Maybe I should video call her so she sees you're okay." I nearly had a heart attack. A video call would expose me instantly. I scrambled, grabbed a blanket, and muffled myself behind it while mumbling about a migraine. Somehow, I convinced him that showing my face would worsen my condition. Crisis averted, barely. Now, here's the kicker, the part one still can't believe. By dinner, my parents had decided that I was too sick to be alone, so they invited a family friend to keep me company. This friend didn't know I was faking anything. For the next 3 hours, I had to maintain this insane charade. I coughed at the right moments, groaned at the right moments, and even managed a faint tear at one point because the headache was unbearable. The friend left thinking I had the flu or something far worse, and I was left alone with my parents, sweating under blankets and wondering how on earth I had created this level of chaos just to skip one family reunion. Eventually, the reunion ended. My parents went, I stayed home, victorious, and I laughed nervously at the absurdity of the situation. But here's the thing. Even now, years later, no one knows the truth. I have carried this dumb, elaborate lie like a badge of honor, a ridiculous secret that makes me simultaneously proud and mortified. Sometimes I replay it in my head, laughing at my own audacity. And other times, I cringe, thinking about how far I went just to avoid a few awkward conversations. So, I have to ask you, have you ever lied so extravagantly just to get out of something completely harmless? Was it worth it, or am I forever doomed to live with the memory of my own performance art gone wild? After my so-called triumph at dodging that family reunion, life returned to its usual rhythm, or at least it seemed that way. But the truth is, my little act of deception had consequences I never anticipated. It's like I opened a door I didn't know existed, and now I was stuck in a room of my own ridiculous lies. You'd think after successfully faking a sickness for a day, I'd have learned a lesson. Nope. That experience somehow rewired my brain to think that if life got uncomfortable, I could just invent an elaborate story and avoid reality. I know it sounds absurd, and it was absurd, but bear with me. Things escalated faster than I could have ever predicted. A few weeks later, school started again. I told myself I was done with lies, that my little escapade was behind me. But apparently, fate had a twisted sense of humor. One Monday morning, my teacher announced a surprise presentation assignment for the next day. Not just any presentation, mind you, but the one that counted for your final grade. Panic immediately set in. I was not prepared, not even close. I had spent the weekend gaming and avoiding anything remotely academic. My heart raced as I sat at my desk, staring at my classmates who were calmly taking notes. That's when the old instinct kicked in, the fake it until you escape instinct. By lunch, I had convinced myself that there was only one viable solution. Call in sick. I mean, I had already proven I could pull it off, right? So I texted my mom, saying my stomach hurt, my head was pounding, and I could barely move. I even threw in a line about feeling dizzy whenever I stood up. She replied almost instantly, concerned, asking if I needed medicine or a doctor. I nodded along, not physically of course, because she wasn't there, she was on the phone. But in my mind, I was celebrating. Another victory. The next day, however, things went sideways in ways I could not have predicted. I was supposed to be resting at home, pretending to be too weak to do anything, but instead, I got a text from my teacher. I hope you're feeling better. We'll miss you today. P.S. I'll call you on Zoom to check in. My heart stopped. Zoom. Video call. If my parents walked in while I was on a call, the entire illusion would collapse. I had to think fast. I grabbed my phone, bolted to the bathroom, and concocted the most ridiculous plan ever. I would lie in the bathtub with a towel over my head, claiming the heat from the water made me dizzy. Genius, right? Absolutely insane, but genius. As I sat there, shivering under a towel, my phone precariously balanced on the edge of the tub, I realized how far I had gone. I was lying in my own bathroom, sweating and panicking, while pretending to be deathly ill for a school presentation. I could feel my face getting red from stress, my stomach churning, not from illness, but from the adrenaline of sustaining a lie that had spun completely out of control. And then it happened. My little sister, who had come home early from dance class, barged in, completely oblivious to my fragile facade. "Whoa! Why are you in the tub with a towel on your head?" she asked, tilting her head like a confused puppy. I froze. My brain scrambled for a believable explanation. It's dizziness therapy?" I stammered. "Yeah, doctor says, dizziness therapy." She blinked at me, unimpressed, then laughed. "You're ridiculous. Mom's gonna flip if she sees you like this." I tried to explain, mumbling something about the Zoom call, but of course, she didn't get it. She laughed some more, shook her head, and went to tell our mom. My stomach dropped. This was it. The moment where my meticulously crafted deception was about to implode. I could hear the phone dialing in the other room. The Zoom call was in less than 5 minutes. Thinking quickly, I grabbed a towel, wrapped myself up like a mummy, and shuffled toward the couch, hoping my mom wouldn't notice the damp mess of a bathroom trail. I collapsed onto the couch just as the Zoom notification popped up. My teacher's face appeared, cheerful as ever, asking how I was feeling. I stammered, coughed, and groaned on cue, trying to make the performance convincing. Somehow, it worked. My teacher bought it completely. But then my mom walked into the room, holding a basket of laundry. "Sweetie, are you okay?" she asked, suspicious. I froze. My brain screamed. I had to improvise. Dizziness therapy. Still ongoing, I muttered, barely coherent. My mom raised an eyebrow but didn't push further, possibly deciding that video calls were weird anyway, and left the room. I exhaled, trembling. Somehow, I had survived this round without anyone discovering the truth. The absurdity didn't end there. By the evening, I realized I had completely faked an entire day of illness without doing anything remotely productive. I had missed the presentation, avoided school responsibilities, and created a story that now required constant maintenance. Every day after that, I had to invent small updates about my recovery, send fake emails to teachers, and act weak in front of my parents to avoid suspicion. It became a full-time job, a bizarre second life where my sole mission was to appear sick without actually being sick. And the strangest part? No one ever questioned it. My parents genuinely believed I was ill. Teachers were sympathetic. My sister occasionally teased me, but nothing more. It was like I had entered this surreal world where my lie had become reality, and I was trapped inside my own ridiculous invention. I laughed at the absurdity, but inside, I felt a growing sense of shame. How did I go from avoiding one family gathering to living a fake illness for weeks on end? How did I become someone so skilled at deception over something so trivial? Years later, I still think about that period in my life and cringe. It was funny in retrospect, but at the time, it was terrifying and exhausting. I learned a lot about human psychology, improvisation, and my own capacity for creativity under pressure, but I also learned that lies, even the smallest ones, have a way of growing beyond your control. And the worst part? I'm still the only one who knows the full story. So here's my question to you. Have you ever faked something so ridiculously elaborate that you ended up trapped in your own creation? Would you own up to it, or would you let it quietly fester like I did? By the time the Sick saga had stretched into its third week, I had reached a point of sheer absurdity that even I couldn't fully process. What started as a tiny fib to avoid a family gathering had snowballed into an all-consuming performance that infiltrated every corner of my life. I would wake up in the morning and immediately remind myself of the symptoms I had invented. Dizziness, nausea, a vague migraine, fatigue so intense I could barely move. I wasn't actually sick. Most of the time, I was perfectly fine, but the constant act had warped my sense of reality. I began to feel like a character in a play I didn't remember auditioning for. It all came to a head on a Wednesday morning. My parents were still incredibly attentive, bringing breakfast to my bed, checking my temperature, and fussing over every groan or sigh I emitted. I had to keep up appearances because I knew that if they ever caught me acting normally, the entire house of cards would collapse. And yet, at the same time, I was exhausted from pretending to be fragile every single hour. It's amazing how much energy it takes to convincingly act weak and sick when your body feels perfectly fine. You think it would be easy, right? Just lie there. But it's not. It's mental gymnastics, constantly monitoring your expressions, your tone of voice, even the way you blink. That morning, as I lay in bed rehearsing my script for the day, I received a text from my best friend. She wanted to meet up at the park. My heart sank. I could hardly say no without exposing myself. If I got up, if I went outside, my parents might see and immediately suspect something. Panic coursed through me. I stared at my phone, trembling, trying to come up with a plausible excuse. Then, a light bulb moment. I could fake a relapse. Perfect. I texted her back. Sorry, I'm feeling worse today. Can't move. Totally miserable. And that's when the real trouble started. Because the moment I said I was worse, the universe decided to test me. My mom walked in, holding a plate of food, and asked if I wanted anything to eat. I weakly shook my head, whispering about nausea. She frowned. Are you sure you're up for breakfast? Maybe I should call the doctor this time. My stomach dropped. Doctor. Oh God, the doctor. I tried to distract her with a cough, but she wasn't buying it. She insisted, and before I knew it, I was being bundled into the car for a doctor's visit. Now, here's the thing. The doctor knew me. He'd seen me plenty of times for real colds, sprained ankles, and the occasional stomach bug. I had no idea how I was going to convince him that I was suffering from some invisible illness that involved dizziness and migraines but otherwise had no actual symptoms. I tried to act shaky, feigning exhaustion as I walked into the office. My heart pounded in my chest like a drum. I could feel sweat forming at my hairline, not from illness, but from sheer terror. The doctor, a man with the patience of a saint, started asking questions. How long have you been feeling like this? I mumbled something about 3 weeks. Any fever? Vomiting? Vision issues? I nodded randomly, hoping I didn't contradict myself. I even went as far as to fake a few fainting spells in the waiting room, much to the confused looks of other patients. Each time, my heart raced faster, knowing that one slip could reveal the truth. And the truth, at that point, was that I was the star of a one-person drama show no one had asked to watch. By the time the doctor actually examined me, I was in full panic mode. He asked me to stand, bend, touch my toes, walk in a straight line. I tried to comply, shaking dramatically, stumbling in a way that seemed almost believable, but not too believable, because I had to maintain the balance between weak and sick, and normal teenager who might be faking it. Somewhere in that process, I accidentally kicked a chair, sending it crashing to the floor with a loud bang. Everyone in the office turned to look, and I froze, hoping they wouldn't notice that I was perfectly fine. The doctor sighed, slightly amused. "You're fine. You're perfectly healthy," he said. I felt a wave of relief mixed with mortification. My parents, who had believed every word, looked shocked and a little disappointed, but they didn't call me out yet. I realized at that moment how dangerously close I had come to being exposed. If I had fainted too convincingly or stumbled too far, the lie would have crumbled. And yet, here I was, walking out of the office with a clean bill of health, feeling both victorious and utterly ridiculous. But of course, my journey didn't end there. Now, I had to convince my parents that the doctor was wrong, that I still felt weak, that my symptoms hadn't magically disappeared just because a man in a white coat said so. The next few days became a blur of exaggerated groans, carefully timed coughs, and strategic use of blankets to appear frail. I was constantly calculating every action. When to moan, how to position myself on the couch, how to avoid physical activity without arousing suspicion. I even started carrying around a small water bottle, pretending I needed frequent hydration breaks. It was exhausting, absurd, and strangely thrilling. The absolute pinnacle of my ridiculous performance came during a video call with my aunt, the same one from the family reunion I had initially tried to avoid. She had heard I'd been sick and wanted to check in. I had to pretend to be on the brink of collapse, my voice trembling, my face pale, and my hands shaking. I even spilled a little water on myself to add authenticity. She gasped, horrified, telling me to rest and promising to visit soon. I slumped dramatically back onto my bed, heart racing. I had done it. I had successfully faked illness for weeks, fooled my entire family, and survived doctor visits and video calls without anyone discovering the truth. And yet, the moment I was alone, I laughed so hard I cried. The absurdity of it all hit me like a ton of bricks. I had created this elaborate web of deception over something so trivial, and now I was trapped in it, addicted to the thrill and terrified of exposure. I realized that while I had been pretending to be sick, I had learned something about myself. I was capable of incredible creativity, improvisation, and sheer audacity, but also that I could get lost in my own ridiculous inventions. So here's my question for you. Have you ever gotten so tangled in a lie that it became its own universe? Did you feel like a genius, or like you were slowly losing your mind? Would you confess, or would you keep performing indefinitely, just like I did? By the time the 4th week of my sick saga rolled around, I was in uncharted territory. What had started as a tiny fib to dodge a single family gathering had ballooned into a full-blown, multi-layered performance that occupied nearly every second of my life. I wasn't just pretending to be sick, I was living the sickness, choreographing it down to the finest details, all while trying not to implode from exhaustion. And that, my friends, is where things took a truly ridiculous turn. It began innocuously enough on a Monday morning. I was lying in bed, groaning in a carefully calculated way, when my mom poked her head into my room with a thermos of soup. "Feeling any better today?" she asked. I coughed theatrically and shook my head. "Worse," I whispered. My stomach tensed as I imagined the day ahead. I needed to maintain this illusion at all costs because even a single slip could undo weeks of work. But the universe apparently had other plans. Just then, my younger cousin, visiting for a short stay, decided to burst into my room unannounced. "Why are you lying there like a zombie? Let's play Mario Kart," she shouted, eyes sparkling with excitement. My brain went into overdrive. Mario Kart. I couldn't move, I had to appear fragile, and yet she was literally dragging me toward the game console. I stumbled back dramatically, clutching my stomach, and croaked, I can't, too weak." My cousin blinked, unimpressed. Then, without warning, she shoved me slightly, just enough to make me topple off the bed. In that instant, time slowed. I hit the floor with a thud, gasping, trying to appear fainted, while my cousin looked horrified. My mom, hearing the commotion, rushed in and froze. "Oh my God! Are you okay?" she shouted. My face contorted in what I hoped looked like pain and weakness. I mumbled something about dizzy spells, fainting, and being too sick to even sit up. My mom hovered over me, concerned, while my cousin hovered too, now convinced I was on the brink of death. The absurdity of it all made my stomach hurt, but not from illness. As if things couldn't get worse, the family friend who had once kept me company during my first sick week called unexpectedly. She wanted to drop by to see how I was doing. I froze. Another witness to my elaborate lie. My mind raced. What if she saw me moving normally? What if she asked me to do something? Panic surged, and in a split second, I decided to hide. I scrambled to the closet, squeezing myself in behind a pile of jackets, whispering to myself about how this was going to be fine even though nothing about it was fine. The friend arrived. I could hear her footsteps in the hallway, the jingling of her keys, and my mom's voice greeting her. I lay perfectly still, imagining that if I moved even an inch, my entire reputation as a sick teenager would collapse. The friend commented on how pale and weak I looked from the doorway. I managed a small cough from the closet, and my mom fussed over me, praising my courage for keeping such a brave face despite feeling awful. I nearly laughed out loud. Here I was, hiding behind coats like a ridiculous spy, and no one suspected a thing. But then came the absolute tipping point, the moment that cemented this week in the annals of absurdity. My mom asked me to fetch something from the kitchen. Normally, this would be a simple task. But how could I, a supposedly gravely ill teenager, possibly walk to the kitchen without exposing the entire lie? My brain raced. And then, in a stroke of sheer desperation, or genius, I decided to perform what can only be described as the most theatrical, slow-motion crawl toward the kitchen in human history. I draped myself over the couch, shuffled like a wounded soldier, groaned audibly, and even paused mid-crawl to catch my breath. My mom watched, concerned, while the friend commented, "Wow, you really are weak." Victory! As I reached the kitchen, I tried to grab a bottle of water with one trembling hand. And that's when it happened. I slipped on a stray sock left on the floor, arms flailing wildly, and went sliding across the linoleum like some kind of cartoon character. Water bottle flew into the air, soup bowl teetered on the counter, and I landed in a heap with a dramatic thud. My mom screamed. The friend gasped. I groaned louder than ever, clutching my stomach and pretending I had injured myself further. In reality, I was perfectly fine, but the performance was flawless. My mom immediately ran to fetch a chair, insisting I sit down before I did any more damage. For the next 20 minutes, I stayed in the kitchen, groaning, coughing, and gasping for air, all while my cousin peeked around the corner, fascinated by what she assumed was my incredible suffering. Every few seconds, I whispered about dizziness, nausea, and heart palpitations, embellishing as needed. I was now a master of improvisation, turning every minor slip, fall, or accidental bump into proof of my ongoing illness. The absurdity of my own creativity made me laugh quietly to myself, But I had to be careful, because laughing too hard might break the illusion. Eventually, the chaos subsided. The friend left, my cousin was sent back to her room, and my mom, exhausted from worrying, decided to let me rest. I collapsed on the couch, shaking, not from weakness, but from adrenaline. I had survived yet another round of ridiculous, high-stakes deception. And the funniest part? My parents still believed I was on the verge of death, completely unaware that every groan, stumble, and fainting spell was part of a carefully choreographed performance. By the end of the day, I realized something profound. I had become addicted to the thrill of deception. It wasn't just about avoiding obligations anymore. It was about controlling a narrative, performing under pressure, and somehow convincing everyone around me that my exaggerated weakness was real. The absurdity of it all made me simultaneously proud and mortified. I had pushed the lie so far that it had taken on a life of its own, and I couldn't see a way to stop it without exposing myself completely. And that's where I was when I first realized this lie had grown far beyond what I could manage. It wasn't just a fib anymore, it was a full-blown persona. A sick teenager who existed in the minds of everyone around me, entirely separate from the real me. And the terrifying part? No one, not even my closest friends, suspected a thing. I was living a secret life of absurd proportions, and I knew that the moment I slipped up, the entire story would unravel spectacularly. So here's my question to you. Have you ever gotten so deep into a lie that it began to control your life? Would you risk slipping further just for the thrill, or would you try to escape while you still could? And most importantly, would anyone believe you if you finally came clean? By the 5th week of my sick saga, I was teetering on the edge of complete absurdity. My elaborate performance, which had begun as a tiny fib to avoid a family reunion, had escalated into a full-blown theatrical production, consuming every moment of my waking life. I had memorized symptoms, perfected the tone of my groans, and choreographed every fall, cough, and faint with military precision. I had become the star of a one-person drama that no one had asked to see, and the craziest part was, everyone was completely convinced. That morning, as I lay on the couch in a carefully arranged blanket cocoon, my mom brought in breakfast like a concerned nurse. "How are you feeling today?" she asked. I groaned in response, my face pale and drawn. "Worse," I whispered, clutching my stomach. My mind immediately shifted into survival mode. I had to keep up appearances, because the moment I faltered, the truth would unravel, and I could feel it creeping closer with every passing day. Things escalated fast when my cousin decided to play a prank. She sneaked into the living room with a squirt bottle filled with water, aiming to wake me up. I screamed dramatically before she even had a chance to squirt me, flailing my arms in exaggerated terror. My mom rushed in, alarmed, thinking I was in genuine distress. I groaned and collapsed backward onto the couch, clutching my head as if I had been struck by a sudden migraine. My cousin froze, horrified at the intensity of my reaction. At that moment, I realized I had mastered the art of turning the mundane into extreme drama. Then came the moment of truth, the ultimate test of my sick persona. My aunt, the very same one I had tried to avoid months ago, decided to visit in person. She was known for her inquisitive nature, the type who could sniff out the faintest hint of deception, and now she was coming straight to my living room. Panic surged through me, and I knew that one slip would expose the entire charade. I scrambled to my makeshift, sick corner, arranging pillows, blankets, and strategically placed tissues to enhance the illusion of fragility. When she arrived, I was already in position, weak, pale, and barely able to lift my head. She gasped in shock. "Oh my goodness! You look terrible! Are you okay?" I nodded weakly, managing a tiny cough that sounded convincingly desperate. My mom jumped in, explaining my condition with every flourish, emphasizing my serious dizziness and nausea. I could see my aunt's eyes widen as she leaned closer, scanning me like a detective looking for evidence. My heart pounded. This was it, the make-or-break moment. Then disaster struck. My cat, normally docile and uninterested, decided it was the perfect time to pounce onto my blanket cocoon. I shrieked in terror, toppling backward in what could only be described as an acrobatic collapse. My aunt gasped louder, my mom's eyes widened, and my cat looked utterly confused by the chaos it had unleashed. I groaned, clutching my stomach, my face contorted in perfect agony. My cousin, watching from the hallway, nearly fell over laughing. In that instant, I realized I had truly become a master of absurdity. Every movement, every sound, every groan was perfectly timed to maintain the illusion of extreme sickness. But here's the twist, the part that makes me laugh and cringe at the same time. In my over-the-top panic, I had accidentally rolled off the couch entirely, landing on the floor with a loud thud. My blanket got tangled around me, my cat leaped in terror, and my aunt practically jumped out of her shoes. I lay there for several seconds, panting, groaning, and wondering if this would finally be the moment the truth came out. My mom knelt beside me, fussing over me, while my aunt hovered, convinced I was on the brink of collapse. The scene was so ridiculous that I couldn't help but laugh quietly to myself, but carefully, so as not to reveal the truth. After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, I finally managed to untangle myself, sitting up with the utmost difficulty, still clutching my stomach for dramatic effect. My aunt, shaking her head, muttered something about calling the doctor if things didn't improve. My mom fussed over me, preparing more soup, more water, more comfort. I had survived the ultimate test of my performance. Somehow, I had convinced my aunt that I was genuinely gravely ill, when in reality, I was perfectly healthy. And yet, the story doesn't end there. In the days that followed, I realized I had to continue the act just to maintain credibility. Every groan, every dramatic cough, every fainting spell became routine. I even started keeping a small, symptom notebook to track consistency. Because once you invest this much time in a lie, you can't let yourself slip. It was exhausting, absurd, and, strangely, exhilarating. I had become a magician of deception, performing a show no one had paid to see, all while learning more about myself than I ever expected. Now, years later, no one knows the full truth. My family still remembers me as the sick teenager, a fragile, delicate figure who required constant attention and care. They have no idea that every cough, every groan, every dramatic collapse was a carefully choreographed performance. I still laugh when I think about it, sometimes in disbelief that I managed to pull it off. And sometimes, I cringe, realizing just how far I went for something so trivial. So, I have to ask you, have you ever created a lie so elaborate, so absurd, that it took on a life of its own? Would you confess, or would you keep performing the show, hidden from the world, just like I did? And most importantly, if you succeeded like I did, would you ever be able to look back without laughing, or crying, or both?